with super passionate, highly motivated individuals in the tech sector, many of whom are Gen Z. And though our careers have spanned multiple industries, our current workforces are already prioritizing flexibility, work-life balance, and all that sort of stuff.
So now that we've kind of provided the context on where we're coming from and the experiences and the events that have shaped Gen Z, let's bring it all back to the theme of the conference in terms of coming together to navigate our crossroads. And we truly are at a unique point in time in terms of, we're not just at a generational crossroad, which sometimes happens, you just have those new generations entering the workforce, but we're at this unique time in that there is generational, cultural, and operational change occurring, and Gen Z is really at the center of it. They are reshaping the way that we work, who we work with, and what we expect from work is quickly shifting, as you can see from, again, some of the conversations we had last night, and thank you for sharing your insights. But we as organizations have the opportunity to either resist some of this change and risk falling behind, or embracing some of the change and moving forward and evolving together. So our question is, how do we turn crossroads into catalysts for creative collaboration? And we truly believe that it's better understanding all who are present. And we feel that Gen Z might be a little bit of a misunderstood generation. Now that, again, we've explored what has shaped them, maybe we can turn the conversation into what they're good at, what is important to them, and how we can support and collaborate with Gen Z to not only help them thrive, but help our organizations thrive as well. And some of the information that's coming behind here is both from data and anecdotes. So we'll start with what they're known to be good at. These are their key skills and strengths in terms of, we like to call them edge factors. They are very creative. They, again, grew up having access to online, so they're used to creating content and they're used to collaborating online. They're curious. I always, Rachel laughs at me, but I say it's almost like you're talking to someone younger who always questions, but why? But why? But why? And when you really understand the but why is coming from to improve the process and to improve the product, it's actually a really interesting conversation that you get into. They learn differently. Again, we've spoken to, they've had online access to TikTok, YouTube, online classes, master classes, you name it, they have access to it. And this allows them to actually be quite resourceful and often self-taught. They're digitally literate, self-explanatory, they care about making a positive impact. They think outside the box, they're gonna challenge the traditional norms, which is actually a sign of critical thinking. And they have global knowledge. They've been plugged in and they've had that access to the worldwide on-demand view since they were basically babies. So our feelings are, if you're not currently engaging with Gen Z, then you're truly missing out because all of this creates real value. The next on our list is to talk about what's important to them. And every generation here in this room, it has their priorities, their preferences, and their perspectives. And from data and anecdotal conversations, this is what is said that Gen Z finds most important to them. And the first one is prioritize health and well-being. They see it as a form of long-term sustainability and not necessarily laziness. And also, if we think about it, they grew up in a time where health and wellness was promoted in their education systems by their guardians in their world. So it's very new to, it's not new to them, it's new to some of the older generations, but they're just used to it. This is their daily conversations. They embrace opportunities for growth, and that just means that they're eager to learn, they're willing to learn. Interesting fact is that they're willing to switch jobs if they don't feel that there is an opportunity for growth. They will go find growth at another organization. They seek belonging, purpose, and community at work. Again, I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, but they really enjoy working on meaningful and purposeful work. And they value transparency, and this is one of the hot topics, but transparency truly does build trust, and they want to know what's going on in your organization, how compensation works, and also they're looking for that feedback and performance reviews, so that's also important to them. So our question to you is, shouldn't we all want some form of this?
So here are some things that I can anecdotally back up the data with, but of course I'll let Nicole speak to some of the actual facts and trends being observed in the people operations world. I expect nobody will be surprised to see flexibility and work-life balance kind of at the top of the list here. I think someone yesterday shared a funny anecdote in a performance review. Their Gen Z employee said one of their goals was to work less than 8 hours or something. So anyway, that's kind of a funny little But you also have to remember that in 2020, when all of the things were going on, life was getting turned upside down, Gen Z was 10 to 22. So the way the world turned, everyone was, working from home more. People were observing their parents and siblings working from home. And all of that focus on well-being was right when we were kind of entering the workforce. So that world of flexibility and remote work, that's kind of our baseline. So that's kind of an interesting shift, I'm sure, from generations gone past. Compensation and retirement benefits has become less of a taboo kind of topic among Gen Z peers. I think it also goes back to, you've got influencers online talking about, like, this is how I get this job, this is how I navigate a conversation with my boss for a promotion. And you've just got all these different people spelling out different ways you can approach it. And the more you hear such kind of ways to do that, it becomes less taboo. So that's kind of, there are many other things at play, but that's another reason why compensation has become top of mind as well. Embracing technology, I'm sure, is no surprise either. We grew up using computers and phones kind of since we were kids, and this is really just second nature to us. So it's important to us that the people we work with kind of let us work as fast as we want to as well. And diversity and inclusion is also on this list. Even if you think about how TV has changed since the 90s, that is like a whole Gen Z lifetime. So that also kind of puts things into perspective.
So now that Rachel's kind of given some insight into what Gen Z is looking for on that job ad or within your organization, maybe let's chat about how we can attract and support and retain not only Gen Z, but a lot of employees in the workplace today. Gen Z, as we've chatted about, has basically been plugged in since they were born. So they're actually looking for a culture of unplugging. And I joke with this one, when we gave this presentation, someone had asked, well, they're always on their phones after work, or they're always playing video games online afterwards. They're looking for a culture of unplugging from work. So we just recommend that you set those work-life balance expectations. And so how do you as an organization think about your flex time, your core hours, your work models? In the tech industry, a hybrid work model is preferred, but speaking with some of you folks online and remote is more preferred. How do you communicate after hours? Do you communicate after hours? Do you ask people to schedule messages to be sent the next day? How do you kind of operate around that? What does your paid time off look like? What does overtime look like? And floating holidays means different things to different organizations, but from our experience in our industry, floating holidays is that we have such a diverse culture within our organizations that sometimes we have these statutory holidays or organized-based holidays that don't necessarily relate to everybody within the organization. So allowing individuals to maybe take a holiday that's more meaningful and purposeful to them, they can switch it out. So we call those floating holidays.
And really, all this comes back to kind of that work-life balancing I was speaking about earlier. When the pandemic was hitting, I was in my early 20s, and I was just like, get me out of here, I should be traveling the world, like what is going on right now? So kind of that work-life balance is the baseline for us. But other things that we wanted to mention, kind of also just setting that expectations, making sure that your employees know the guardrails that they have to operate in is just so important. And you might find that if people know exactly what's expected of them, they're more motivated to kind of meet those expectations.
And as we've chatted about opportunities for growth, this is one of my favorite places to quote unquote play in terms of you don't always need to have the biggest paycheck or the biggest budget to provide opportunities for growth within your organization. Some of the ways that you can handle opportunities for growth is internal mobility. Do you allow people within your organization to maybe move laterally, take on a new role for a couple of months? Those opportunities are really important and again, don't cost a whole lot of money for you as an organization. What does your promotion process look like, and do you have a career progression framework? Do individuals know how to progress throughout your organization? And if you do have these, that is excellent, but just make sure you're communicating them as well and people have transparency and access to how they work. As well as ownership. Gen Z, of course, is looking for a little bit more ownership and responsibility in the workplace, so there's creative ways to provide that ownership and responsibility. And then again, learning and development is my favorite place. You can provide L&D stipends, mentorship. This is a huge one for both Rachel and I. You can do it within your organization, outside your organization. Lunch and learns, they can be informal or formal. You can have individuals talk about their passions, their hobbies to create that culture of getting to know each other better and engagement. Or you can have it a little bit more professional, talk about a project that you're working on at work or something that's important to the organization. And then networking opportunities. we here, I think everybody in this room sees the value in networking, and it's important to allow the younger generations to have that opportunity as well, and provide support and maybe how to networking, because networking is really a skill set, and it does have to be practiced and learned. So it's important to not only provide those opportunities, but maybe coach and encourage younger generations on how to network.
Absolutely. And just kind of diving back into the mentorship for one moment, just an anecdote from someone at my company. I work with a really small company, so every person is pretty important in kind of the role that they play. But there was someone on our team who was just not getting the mentorship that they needed or wanted, and they were like actively seeking new work. There was a shift in management in the company just to provide that person with a different mentor, and things have completely kind of changed around. So that person is still here and is performing better than they ever really have.
Then for the next one, I'm sure many of you have heard it, and I've heard it time and time again, that Gen Z is looking for higher and higher salaries. And there's many reasons as to why that is, and some of them are the rising cost of living, student debt, and also the unstable job market. And also there's some large organizations out there who are going to pay those larger those paychecks, I guess. And so how do we, as small to medium-sized organizations or some larger organizations in the room, how can we compete maybe with some of those higher salaries that are being provided? And there's lots of ways to get creative for attraction and retention. One of the number one priorities, as we had chatted about with Gen Z, is health and well-being. So health and dental benefits is an absolute must. Career progression we've chatted about, they want to be able to see opportunities for growth and how to navigate that within your organization. Employee wellness, this is a place that you truly can play a little bit in terms of you can provide additional flexibility, personal days, and again, mental health supports and an employee assistance program is really important and truly goes a long way. RSP matching, paid time off, you can get flexible. Rachel's going to tell a little bit of the story of the paid time off, and then learning and development, so providing that opportunity again to continue to grow.
Paid time off, when you can manage it, is great. Another creative perk that I've seen is unpaid time off. So my company actually let me take unpaid time off last year, which was everything I wanted. I feel like I've been talking about the pandemic a lot, I'm so sorry. But when I graduated school, I had been saving up throughout my whole degree. I couldn't wait to go on a grad trip, but of course it was 2021, so that was not really possible. And it had been something that had been like ruminating inside my mind for a long time. And my company actually let me take unpaid leave. So it was something that once I came back, I had never been so productive in my life because I felt like the company saw me for a person with their own goals and aspirations. And anyway, it's just something kind of creative to give that extra flexibility if you can manage it without having to throw some extra money in the pot as well.
And then the last one for me, before I throw it back over to Rachel, and I chuckled this one a little bit because this is Rachel through and through. She embodies this. Gen Z expects things to be fast and efficient. They love to be fast. Rachel talks fast, she types fast, and she needs to find answers fast. So sometimes when we're having a chat, Rachel will go, surely this problem's been solved somewhere else, or already solved, and she's already on her phone looking at ChatGPT or Google on how to find the answer to the solution, or the solution to the answer, or question. So it's really funny working with Rachel because I can't keep up. But it's kind of similar in terms of embracing new technology, and I think many of you, from speaking with you last night, that you folks are open to this as well, but leveraging those instant messaging tools is really important. Not only leveraging them, but making sure that you're using them and having communication on when to use them and which ones to use when. Utilize productivity tools. We've chatted about AI. I'm sure you've all been at conferences where AI is a main point of conversation, and as well as project management tools. And there's been a couple of organizations I've worked with, they have the project management tools, but they don't utilize them effectively, which also is very frustrating. So if you do have them, make sure that you utilize them, and then just invest in the tech that moves quickly. So we're very fortunate that the tech industry is very competitive, and a lot of the softwares are coming down in price. So sometimes if you do your research, you are likely to find a solution that is a little bit more cost effective.
And kind of also to drill this home, I'm not really sure what side of the internet any of you are on, but at least for me as a Gen Z, my algorithm feeds me, kind of TikToks like when your boomer boss makes 10 figures but doesn't know how to export a PDF. So if anybody here doesn't know how to export a PDF, please come see me. I'd love to help you. But it's just kind of making light of the fact that this is what Gen Z is always talking about. We love moving fast, like Nicole said. we added this one in here. Also wanted to mention that we're not experts in this, but this is what research surveys are showing that Gen Z is looking for. Going back to that idea of kind of intersectionalities that we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, just knowing that there's a path of growth is really important to Gen Z, and I can speak a lot in my own experiences as well. In a lot of cases, this is demonstrated based on how you have already built or promoted your team, and having mentorship from someone who you can kind of see yourself in is really important. And also, on the other side, someone that you don't know a lot about, just to kind of share those experiences. It's also building that relationship a lot stronger. So this also ties into our next point. In my own experience, so I studied electrical engineering. You can imagine there's not a ton of people that look like me, more and more kind of every year. But it's hard in a situation where the people that you're working with that would be, helping you with your career growth are saying things like, oh, when you give this to the engineer, he'll do this, he'll go do that, and then he'll do this other thing. And you're like, hello, I'm standing right here. Do you think I can't do this? Or really, I think in a lot of cases, it's just what's ingrained, it's habits. But just a simple switch of saying, oh, when we give this to engineer, they'll do this, then they'll go do this other thing. It's like, oh, okay, you can see me being in this role. This is making me a lot more motivated. I want to do my best so I can be this hypothetical engineer someday. Also, just establishing some foundational policies and processes is really helpful to help your employees know their guardrails, kind of like we've discussed before. And we encourage you to seek ways to foster a culture of constructive feedback and constructive conflicted conversations. So things where people come together and then they can grow. And if you'd like any book recommendations on that, we're happy to give some. Some of our favorites are Crucial Conversations and Radical Candor. You might find a lot of resources in there for how to navigate some difficult conversations, especially when trying to provide feedback to the ever-growing Gen Z employee. But also, when all else fails, food is an amazing thing to bring people together. Just having a bunch of people around enjoying some food from any culture, it's just a great informal way to get to know the people that you're working with. Kind of like we all shared breakfast this morning, it's just something that can also help you build your teams. And one other thing we wanted to leave you with is this idea of reverse mentoring. So kind of approaching, you can do this more formally where there's a formal reverse mentor relationship where you're supposed to be learning from your Gen Z employee, kind of like the traditional older employee mentoring a younger one, or you can just have it informal by approaching conversations with those younger employees with curiosity and an openness and kind of an expectation to learn something. So it's iceberg season in Newfoundland and Labrador, so we thought we'd use kind of the iceberg model where if anyone knows anything about icebergs, maybe you don't, what you see on the top is about a fifth of the size of everything underneath. So looking at kind of those traits and behaviors that are presenting themselves are just the tip of the surface behind what's motivating, what experiences they've had. And obviously it just all goes back to getting to know the people you're working with so you can be more effective together. And we 100% guarantee that if you go into those conversations with curiosity, expecting to learn something, you absolutely will.
Yeah, and talking about mentorship, one of my good mentors, Jess Chapman, who's a HR professional in Atlanta, Canada, she talks about the analogy of putting coins in a piggy bank, and I'll never forget this. So each time you have an intentional conversation with somebody that you're working with and getting to know them better, you're building that wealthy relationship, so you're kind of building that investment. Then when you have some challenging conversations and you have to overcome obstacles together, you might need to take some of those coins out, but because you've built them up, and you have so many in that investment that it won't negatively impact your relationship. So maybe think about having conversations and getting to know the people that you work with as investing in relationships. And it truly does make for a better workforce when you get to know everybody that is working with you.
So finally, just thought we'd leave you with kind of a reflection exercise. At the crossroads, you can cling to what's familiar or you can choose to evolve. Gen Z isn't just another generation, we're your next big opportunity. What strengths do your Gen Z employees bring to the table? Which of those strengths could you be better leveraging? And how can you start taking advantage of those strengths when you're back in the office next week? That's it for us. Thank you so much. Definitely making lots of jokes about it. It kind of goes back to also in similar ways that There's lots of media about like, oh, how to talk to your manager about this. It's also like people speaking about how they manage their stress online. So my own experience with my own friend groups, I know if I show up with someone, it's like, sorry, I'm having a mentee bee, I'm okay. And I think it's also all about, we are such a plugged-in generation. I think lots of us can afford to look for ways beyond just getting on our phones and kind of doom scrolling the stress away. It's different for every person, but don't be surprised if your Gen Z employees are trying to tell you that they're stressed by saying that they're having a mentee bee. That means mental breakdown. You should be concerned.
I think it's also a good point. That's where coaching and mentorship comes in from some of the older generations. I think when you're entering the workforce in general, it's always a stressful time, and we've all kind of been there, we all gone through it, and I'm sure you can all kind of point back to maybe someone who's helped you navigate it or helped you better understand it. So while Gen Z is kind of known to be a little bit more of a stressed, I'd say, generation, I think that that's where our responsibility is, maybe some of the older generations, to come in and kind of have that coaching and mentorship moment.
Absolutely.
How do you get past like the financial conversation it was always like we're negotiating based on the experience you bring to the table on top of like other qualities that as you get more senior, they're not necessarily paying you the fact that you role. You're also overcome that. That's as an elder millennial have to solve conversations.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. The question was all about navigating conversations about, I guess, financial conversations, promotions, hiring, compensation, and just how do you navigate those, and especially helping your Gen Z employees recognize that it's not just whether you can do the role, but also that your experience in the role has a lot to play with how much you can be compensated.
It's a great question, and it's often very complex, and it comes down to a lot of, I guess I'll start with my perspective and where I'm coming from. So I come from a point where I think compensation should be transparent. I think expectations should be set. I think transparency should be in place. It actually reduces a lot of the conversations after you get past the initial implementation. So I think the way that you said that you approached it is kind of bringing your experience and bringing what you kind of worked on as well. Sometimes, unfortunately, it comes around from maybe leadership not necessarily knowing how to have those conversations back as well, and that's a big thing. Actually, if you've read the Gallup report in 2025, one of the main priorities in HR in Canada and, well, North America in general is training leadership to have those challenging conversations around career progression, around compensation, and making it a little bit more transparent, because it is such a complex conversation. So unfortunately, I don't have any additional advice to you other than what you're doing of bringing your experience and expectations, but maybe opening up the conversation around how does compensation work? Can we maybe have a conversation around it? And is there an opportunity to maybe make it a little bit more transparent within the organization?
And I can second that. So Nicole, as we mentioned, we formally worked together, and Nicole did incredible work at our organization in creating a career development framework. So as a person who's new to the workforce, that was immensely helpful for me to also see, okay, this is what is expected at this level, this is how you move up, this is what these levels can expect to get paid. Also so that you know your bounds. So it's not like, oh, well, this TikToker who I don't know where they're from said that they're making 100K and they're just exporting PDFs all day. So I do more than that. I should make 110. So it's about kind of setting those organization-specific expectations too. It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah.
Okay, question. I'm not sure exactly the phrase, but through press about Aristotle, all the way to today, we always blame the younger generation for being lazy and those kind of things. Nobody hear me. It's not that great of a question. All right, so from Aristotle on to my mother and on to everybody else, blame the younger generation, call them lazy, all those kind of things. I totally get that, but historically, the older generation hasn't just stopped and said, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? We've got to cater to this group. There's been this like tough love between the generations that has led to the evolution and of probably both, right? When two forces clash, they both change a little bit. This feels a little bit different. This is like, yeah, no,
yeah, we're not changing, you need to evolve, right? Pick up our lingo. I don't know, there's not it doesn't feel like as much give and take. Even this presentation, Aristotle didn't get a presentation like this saying, okay, here's how you talk to Archimedes. I know he's a little out there, but this is how you talk to him. So help me understand, like, what are the cons of just caving in and saying, okay, sorry, you're right, work your way, as opposed to, because you don't want to turn over your business management to people that don't have that experience. All right, help me with that.
Maybe I could start, and you can fill in as you'd like, Nicole, as well. First of all, I agree, experience to both of your points is incredibly helpful, and even at the company I work at right now, like, there's a lot of Gen Zs, and we could really use someone who's been through it, because it is difficult to kind of self-manage in that way. The mentorship, like we spoke about, is so important. I think in terms of the presentation, maybe it's also like the Gen Z. I feel like I'm not going to give you a good answer here. I'm trying my best. Yeah. Let me think for a second. Do you have any thoughts to jump in with?
Yeah, that's kind of why we said on that slide in terms of we are in such a unique period of time. There's the generational change, which often happens, obviously, every time a new generation, but we truly are at this really unique time where, like you had mentioned, like the cultural operational change, and the operational change, I think, is maybe where you're coming from a little bit and pushing back. I think it's just so important to set those expectations from a leadership management side, and it's really important to have those open conversations, and I think that's maybe where you were going, is just continue to have those conversations. And it's okay for organizations to set expectations and withhold those expectations, and that's what I've been learning from my mentor, Jess. She's a wonderful, Jess Chapman, if you ever need any help, that's my shameless plug for her, but she truly sits down with your organization and she provides you insights into how to have those conversations. So it's okay to set the expectations. It's also great to have those conversations and better understand where both parties are coming from. But in order to do that, both parties have to be willing to sit at that table. And I think that that's a piece that's missing, is often not both parties are coming with good intentions, and that's something that there's intention versus impact. So if you're truly coming with good intentions, then your impact is likely going to be positive. But if you're not coming from a point of good intentions and you're coming in and you're like, I'm just going to have this conversation because I need to have this conversation, then your impact's going to be negative. Gen Z is probably going to roll their eyes and be like, well, they don't really care about me. So I think that if I'd leave you with anything, it's the coming together, having those conversations, and coming with good intention and trying to truly understand who's at the table and where they're coming from.
I also think, if I could add a little bit to that, I think that part of what I'm seeing in this presentation is, I think that Gen Z becomes a little bit of a lightning rod for cultural change that is happening.
And won't stop. So for example, we were all hit by a pandemic. It changed the way we work. It's not just Gen Z that has different expectations about what their life should look like, what flexibility maybe they should have. More of them have that because that's their only lived experience versus the rest of us that is a shorter period within like a longer lived experience. I think the same thing for inclusivity and diversity. Our population is becoming more diverse. That's not changing, so we do have to embrace it. It's not only Gen Z that's asking for that, but they are asking for that more because, again, that is their entire lived experience versus just a portion of it for the rest of us. So I think the reason maybe why it seems like there's more of a call to adapt is that these are bigger. These are forces that go far beyond one generation. I think, but sometimes Gen Z is representative of them. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but that really hit me in looking at the themes that we saw here.
Yeah, we agree. Great answer.
Yeah.
Another question.